Okay, I am afraid of investing in the stock market. What should I do? All right, my name is Tim if you don't know me, and here on my channel we talk about personal finance without soliciting to you, just giving you good solid information that you can use to hopefully engage your critical thinking and get going with your personal finances. All right, I am afraid to invest in the stock market. What should I do? By the way, if you find my content valuable, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. There's so much scary information out there about the stock market. It's confusing. You're getting information from here, there, and everywhere. I went through it. I went through a stage of trepidation, fear. I had read a whole bunch of stuff, I read Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, and Dave is great when it comes to getting out of debt and actually saving for emergencies and things like that. All of the stuff that we talked about, getting that foundation all the way up to saving that 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. But once you kind of get your finances out of control, under control, and you have margin in your budget, then there comes that time to invest. Well, I'll confess to you that once I got to the point to where I could invest, where I had some margin and that sort of thing, I was confused. Even after reading Dave Ramsey's book and a whole bunch of other books, Dave recommends splitting between 4 different mutual funds and in different categories and that sort of thing. And I started trying to do that, but I was confused. And you turn on the television and something was happening. I kind of first started trying to do some of these things in the early 2000s. Well, in the early 2000s, there was the dot-com bubble, okay? And then later in 2008, we had the big financial crisis. And I made the huge mistake of pulling my money out of stocks and actually putting it into a money market account because I was afraid. I was afraid because back then we had the housing crisis and everything was just kind of going off of the cliff back then. And a lot of people were afraid, and so was I. And I made that error of pulling it out of stocks when if I had left it in, it would have been thousands of dollars that I would have been ahead had I just stayed the course and kept my money in something like an S&P 500 index fund, okay? So you get all of this information, all of this stuff being thrown at you. Fear. Recently, we have AI. We have all these data centers being built and things like that. And we're having talks, at least the media and in social media, about a possible AI bubble. The scary thing about bubbles is that they burst. What if the bubble bursts? We are heavily invested in, and the stock market is driven by these AI technologies. We're also learning that cryptocurrency seems to kind of be tied to it because it is a tech kind of thing, cryptocurrency is. And so as the tech gets hit, so does cryptocurrency. And we've seen a drop in cryptocurrency here recently. And so all of these things hit. What do you do? How do you invest? Well, I'm going to suggest an answer for you, okay? But as I suggest this answer, I'm going to go through a scenario that kind of hopefully helps you think and hopefully helps keep you calm as you're investing and keeps you on a path to where you don't get to a point to where you pull out of your plan, just like I did in 2008, that you stay the course and you get the full benefit of investing, okay? All right, so what do you invest in? What I suggest and what I would tell anyone who's close to me, again, I'm not a financial advisor, so you definitely want to do your own research and that sort of thing, but you can learn from what I would do and what I would suggest to my closest friends and family. I would suggest index funds. I would suggest something like an S&P 500 index fund. Now, what is an S&P 500 index fund? It's just a fund that follows the index of the S&P 500. All the S&P 500 is the top 500 companies here in the US. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Walmart, McDonald's. All you're doing when you purchase an S&P 500 fund is you're purchasing a little piece of ownership of those companies. You're purchasing a little piece of ownership of Apple, a little piece of ownership of McDonald's, a little piece of ownership of Google, a little piece of ownership of Facebook, or it's called Meta now, a little piece of ownership of these new AI companies that are coming online. And what happens is that as the value of those companies get better, as those top CEOs are working on innovation and coming out with new products and things like that, and over time, as they become more valuable, you become more valuable by purchasing that S&P 500 fund that is all 500 companies bundled up together. You have a little piece of each one of those companies, okay? This is powerful. This is incredible. The reason that it is it creates that certainty for you, because there's several neat things about an index fund. And again, we're talking about the S&P 500 index fund right now. You have all of these different companies, all 500 of these companies. What if something happens to one of the companies? Like in the past, I don't know, I may show my age a little bit, but there used to be Sears. Sears used to be a huge company. When you thought about retail, you thought about Sears. Well, Sears is gone now. It no longer exists. So what if one of these 500 companies, let's take Apple, I'll pick on Apple a little bit. Let's say that something happens with Apple with its phones. Something happens, they start spontaneously combusting or something like that. And Apple loses its value and goes out of business. Well, that's one company in the 500 companies. So if Apple fails, you have 499 other companies in there that might be doing okay or very well. Here's the other thing that's incredible with an index fund like the S&P 500. If Apple fails, what happens is company 501 just slides up into the top 500 companies. So it's just replaced by the next company. And all of this is just done automatically. It doesn't need a manager or anything like that, which is a whole nother point. There are actively managed funds. This is where someone is paid to actually pick all of the stocks within the fund, and they're paid a salary to actually do that. Many of these guys are highly educated, and gals are highly educated. They come from the Ivy League companies and things like that, or Ivy League schools rather, and they're hired at hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, even $1 million per year, to manage these actively managed funds, okay? The crazy thing is that a large percentage of them fail to beat. I think 80% of them fail to beat, or a little over 80% of them fail to beat the S&P 500 index fund. If you take that over 20 years of investing, like let's say that you invest in an S&P 500 and I were to invest in an actively managed fund over a 20-year period, from now till 20 years from now, well, that number goes up. The active manager fails to beat the S&P 500 94% of the time over a 20-year investing period. This is incredible. So you could invest in something like an S&P 500 fund, and you will beat 94% of the time, you will beat the active managers in these actively managed funds. This is incredible. It's almost as if you're able to hit the easy button and just invest in an index fund, and that takes care of things for you. I'm going to suggest some reading for you. There's a book called The Simple Path to Wealth. Take the time to read that book. If you are, even if you aren't at the investing phase yet, go ahead and read that book. It's a very, very specific prescription on how to invest. What J.L. Collins recommends there is a total stock market index fund from Vanguard. okay, I actually invest in that very fund. So that's disclaimer there. Now, this is not a commercial for Vanguard. It doesn't have to be Vanguard. I mean, you can get index funds from companies like Fidelity or Charles Schwab. All of these companies are good. The thing is to learn about and start to invest in index funds. Now, why do I kind of push index funds? Because there's other things to invest in. You're going to, especially in this environment, you're going to hear about cryptocurrency. You're going to hear about gold. You're going to hear about all sorts of things. But what you want to do is look at the track record of folks who have invested and what is easily accessible and has a long-term track record that you can look at and actually put your resources into. The S&P 500 index has been around in the form that it is now since the 50s, okay? So you would take 1950 to 2025, we have 70 plus years of track record of the S&P 500 returning right in that 10 to 11% range is the return that the S&P 500 has given. So you have something solid. You only really need two things to be successful in your investing. You need to put in a certain amount. I recommend looking for the aspirational goal of investing 25% of your income, but invest what you can. 5% if that's what it is, 10% if that's what it is, and then work your way up to investing more. But having a 70 plus year track record of knowing that you're going to get 10 to 11%, all you need to do is figure out what you're going to how much you're going to invest and give it the time needed to actually have it work for you. That's all that you need to think about. How much can I invest? And you want to up that as much as you can over time. How much can you invest? And then the time horizon. Give yourself enough time to be successful at it. That's it, okay? You've been given the responsibility to take care of this. Companies no longer have pensions and things like that. That's frustrating, that's tough. I mean, I know that it feels somewhat unfair that now we have to take on the responsibility for this. Companies are no longer taking care of you with a pension. So you've got to be the pilot of your, what I like to call opportunity and options phase, the retirement phase of your life. You have to be the pilot of that. They're not taking care of you anymore. So you've got to take care of it. But you need to look at things where you don't need to be the expert, okay? Yes, some of this stuff is complicated. Many professionals, like I said, can't beat the S&P 500. So rather than going out there and doing something complicated, like trying to pick your own stocks, trying to find out which company is going to be a star and which one's not going to make it, don't do that. That's very complicated and difficult. Most people cannot do that. In fact, most people who trade, 97, 98% of them lose money who trade single stocks. So don't do that. Take a look at index funds. Get involved with index funds would be what I would do, or I would have told my younger self, and I would tell anybody that I care about, look at index funds. Do the research. Get involved in that. Because you can build a future where your assets can pay for your lifestyle. Again, if you find my content valuable, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Remember that here, you're going to be given concepts and ideas and tips without being solicited to. It's just information for you to learn and hopefully do better with your personal finances. Thanks again for listening.